Bangalore. Hope all of you doing good in this challenging pandemic. So maybe in another 10 to 12 minutes, I'll just give an overview on the clinical manifestation and the therapy for COVID-19 pneumonia. So when it comes to clinical manifestation, we understood that initially COVID patient can have some sort of atypical viral prodrome with a fever, myalgia, some sort of sore throat or minimal cough. Later, they might develop severity increase in terms of persistent fever, or they can have a breathing difficulty. When you measure their oxygen saturation, which may looks like less than the normal range, which is less than 92 to 93 and all. So sometimes they can also complain breathing difficulty, like their respiratory rate is going more than 25-30, what we call it as tachypnea. So based on the clinical manifestation, we classify them as mild, moderate, severe. So mild in terms of only the prodromes without any respiratory system involvement. Moderate, they are started requiring some minimal oxygen to maintain their oxygen saturation. Severe, so they require a support like non-invasive ventilation or maybe mechanical ventilator to maintain the oxygen saturation. So this is the clinical classification. So we have a biochemical supportive data, like someone who is having normal markers of COVID-19 like C-reactive protein, LDH, ferritin, fibrinogen, D-dimer. So they belongs to mild or maybe sometimes asymptomatic COVID-19. If there is an elevated markers about one and a half times from that of the baseline, so they fit into moderate category. When the markers are elevated exponentially high from the baseline, including a cytokine that is interleukin 6, then we label them as severe category of the COVID-19 pneumonia. So when it comes to taking care of this COVID-19 patients, so first thing we need to understand, self-care is very, very important. Whether you are a baseline healthcare provider or home healthcare provider, so you need to take care of yourself with the appropriate N95 mask and level 3 personal protective equipment and all. So then most of the patients, like 85 to 90% of the patient might not require immediate hospitalization, but they need a proper care with a monitored area. Like we need to monitor their oxygen saturation, fever, heart rate, breathing rate on home based with a particularly second hourly, third hourly, depending upon their need. Those patients with a existing comorbid condition, say maybe if they are having diabetes, uncontrolled hypertension, they were already on some sort of immunocompromised disease status like some leukemia, other solid organ malignancy, or they are on chemotherapy, prolonged steroid, elderly patient more than 55 to 60, 65 years and all. So those are all more susceptible for rapid deterioration. You need to need some sort of more appropriate monitoring of all these patients. So when a patient is totally asymptomatic, mild, so usually you can treat them symptomatically with a paracetamol for fever, maybe 500 to 650 milligram, maximum 6 means 4 times in a day we can give. We can start them on ivermectin 12 milligram once in a day for 3 to 5 days in the morning. So doxycycline 100 milligram, so 2 times a day for about 5 days with a zinc supplement of 50 milligram once in a day. Vitamin C 500 milligram twice or thrice a day we can continue with appropriately repeating the marker once in 72 hours, once in 4 days, like that. When a patient is moderate category, okay, so this is something we need to give attention to them when they started requiring oxygen support with a simple face mask, nasal cannula, high flow nasal cannula, non-invasive ventilation, or sometimes if they deteriorate from a moderate to severe category, they might require appropriate mechanical ventilation, what we call it as invasive ventilation. So this is the phase, like when a patient is in and around moderate category of the illness, so they need some sort of hospitalization. So basically to monitor their oxygen saturation, to monitor their work of breathing, or to monitor other comorbid condition, exaggeration, and the markers of the illness of COVID-19 and all. So we can provide the oxygen with any of the supportive devices to maintain the oxygen saturation of more than 92. So that is the acceptable thing. So then the pharmacological therapy, when they started requiring oxygen, it is worth starting them on steroid, usually dexamethasone, either oral or maybe intravenous route, 6 milligram once in a day. So there are lots of like confusion whether 6 milligram is sufficient. See, currently the evidence, the recovery trial is suggesting 6 milligram dexamethasone is needed in a patient who is requiring oxygen or mechanical ventilation. There is no huge data to consider very high dose of steroid. How much duration we need to give the dexamethasone or its equivalent, that is methylprednisolone, maybe 40 milligram OD, or hydrocortisone, that is about maximum of 180 to 200 milligram in a day, so maximum of 10 days. So there is no evidence to prolong the steroid, no evidence to increase the dosage of steroid also. Maybe worst scenario, if you feel patient is having a severe cytokine storm, okay, sudden elevation in the C-reactive protein, fibrinogen, ferritin, D-dimer, interleukin 6 and all, so then maybe you can consider maximum of methylprednisolone 40 milligram BD. When it compared to dexamethasone versus methylprednisolone, there are small data to suggest methylprednisolone helps in early recovery of the symptoms, early decrease in the oxygen support and all, but otherwise there is no much difference in terms of the mortality. Next therapy in a moderate category, so we need to give an injection remdesivir, 200 milligram stat, next day 100 milligram once in a daily IV injection for about total 600 milligram, like 4 days of 100 milligram once in a day and 200 milligram stat. When a patient is having severe liver dysfunction or renal dysfunction, we need to adjust the dosage of remdesivir. Maybe we need to cut down the dosage to 50%. Again, in pregnancy, remdesivir therapy is not established any sort of safety, but like you can take weighing the risk and benefit. So if you have a question, if the remdesivir is going to have a very good mortality benefit, answer is no. Suppose like if you are able to arrange remdesivir, it's well and good in a moderate category of the patient. If you are not able to arrange, then it's also fine. Next therapy, which is very important, is like anticoagulation. Some more is requiring oxygen in a moderate category of the illness with the elevated markers, D-dimer, CRP, ferritin, all these things. So you can consider them on therapeutic anticoagulation. So when a patient got admitted, you can go for low molecular weight heparin like enoxaparin, 1 milligram per kg twice a daily, or deltaparin, that is fragbin, 5,000 units subcutaneously twice daily, or you can go for fondaparinux, that is a factor 10A inhibitor, subcutaneously according to their weight. Like if they are 50 kg to 75 kg, 5 milligram, 75 to 100 kg, 7.5 milligram once in a day, or more than 100 kg, 10 milligram, you can consider. So if the patient is too much conscious oriented, able to take tablets by mouth, so then you can go for direct thrombin inhibitor like dabigatran 150 milligram twice a daily, or apixaban, rivaroxaban. So these are the, again, factor 10 inhibitor. These are called as the newer oral anticoagulants. So basically these therapies doesn't require any sort of monitoring. So next, the confusion arises after the steroid, remdesivir, oxygen, anticoagulation. So to target any sort of these anti-cytokine therapies to target the interleukin 6 and all, if you consider these monoclonal antibodies, when a patient is in a moderate category or is moving into severe category in terms of oxygen requirement, say when a patient is on more than 8 liter of oxygen on non-invasive ventilation, is tachypneic or sudden increase in interleukin 6 or other markers, or sudden deterioration in the clinical scenario, so then we need to consider giving some sort of agents like IL-6 inhibitor and all. But what is the evidence? Only evidence with a recovery trial, Impacta, Covacta trial, is on tocilizumab, that is 400 milligram over 1 hour infusion you can give. Rest of the monoclonal antibodies has been approved for emergency utility. Say it may be itolizumab, baricitinib, it's a JAK2 inhibitor, itolizumab is a CD6 inhibitor, or like we have bevacizumab, okay, so which is again vascular endothelial growth factor inhibitor. So we don't have a huge data to currently approve all these therapy for all the patient or to risk stratify, because the problem is, so we need to evaluate for relative contraindications, like they should not have thrombocytopenia, WBC should be between 4,000 to 12,000, procalcitonin should be normal, no ongoing bacterial infection. So all these things should be satisfied before we consider monoclonal antibody. Again, there might be some chance of secondary infection when you use monoclonal antibody. So you have to be very choosy, weighing the risk and benefit. So there are other therapies, like they are speaking about methylene blue. Definitely we don't have any much data on that. Ulinastatin is one agent, serine protease inhibitor. You can consider like high dose 2 to 3 international units IV 12th hourly for 5 to 7 days, which prevent the pan pros and pro-inflammatory cytokine release like IL-6, IL-1 beta, TNF alpha, IL-2, IL-8, and all those things. One more, immunosin alpha, that is thymosin alpha. There is some evidence to suggest which helps in producing more and more mature T cells, so that these T cells are going to helpful in preventing the cytokine storm and all. So we can consider immunosin alpha according to the category of the severity. Mild, you can give 1.6 milligram like twice a day subcutaneously. Moderate, 3.2 milligram subcutaneously twice a day. 6.4 milligram twice a day subcutaneously for severe category of the illness. Remember, all these add-on therapies, currently we don't have a very good, huge randomized control trials to suggest any sort of mortality benefit. You have to individualize the therapy, consider its adverse effect, consider its relative contraindication when you consider these kind of add-on therapy in COVID-19 pneumonia. Next, one more thing very important in terms of the ventilation is, when a patient is conscious oriented, encourage them to like sleep in the prone position, so which helps in recruitment of the lung. But even though awake prone, we are not able to have any control on the key parameter, that is tidal volume. At least like proning helps in some sort of recruitment, so that we can come down on the FiO2. Last category of the disease, that is severe category, when a patient is requiring more than 15 liter of oxygen on non-invasive ventilation, or if he got intubated, so paralyze them, start them on adequate sedation, make them prone ventilation with a lung protective ventilation with a tidal volume of 6 ml per kg, maintain P plateau, end inspiratory of less than 30 if the patient is not obese, non-pregnant and all. So continue prone ventilation for at least 16 to 24 hours depending upon their response to therapy. Keep them on U balance or negative fluid balance after initial adequate resuscitation if there is no ongoing hypoperfusion, like lactate is normal, urine output is normal and all. So adequate PEEP. Initially, if the lung compliance is good, don't jump on increasing the PEEP and all, because increased PEEP in a good compliant lung can cause hemodynamic consequences, and it can itself cause ventilator-induced lung injury and all. So that we need to remember. So later, when you proceed with the managing patient on ventilator, you have to take care of other supportive care, nutrition, deep venous thrombosis prophylaxis. Obviously, these patients will be on therapeutic dose of anticoagulation, prevention of pressure sores. Okay, so along with that, prevention of dyselectrolemia, so physiotherapy and all those things. Later, the care comes with whether to attempt and weaning, or we can go for tracheostomy and all. So you can attempt weaning if the weaning screen, if the parameters are looking good and all. So maybe if the patient is on spontaneous breathing with a minimum PEEP of around less than 8 with 35 to 40% of FiO2, so then you can attempt weaning. So if you are able to successfully wean, it's well and good, or you can consider tracheostomy. So later, when a patient is in the third phase of ARDS, worry is like fibrotic changes, lung becomes stiff, difficulty in achieving the tidal volume. So your P plateau is crossing more than 30, peak airway pressure is going up. So you can consider some sort of antifibrotic agents like pirfenidone, nintedanib. Even though we don't have huge data fibrosis in this ARDS, you can choose, but only thing is you need to monitor liver function test adequately when a patient is on antifibrotic therapy. So one more aspect I just want to tell is, what is the evidence on plasma therapy? So there is no good evidence to suggest the utility of the convalescent plasma in this era. So you can take a call on individualizing the therapy. So like what is the indication? Maybe when a patient is on moderate or less than severe category of the illness, in the first week of illness, we can consider giving the convalescent plasma, whatever the worth, but data is not suggesting in a favorable way in terms of improvement in the outcome. So there are some other therapies which we can consider. There is something called like cytokine removal, so therapy like cytosorb or Oxaris filter and all. So though there are some anecdotal case reports on this, so you have to take a call on individualizing therapy just to help cytokine removal to have an preventing the impact of the cytokine on other organ system and all. So one more aspect, they are more prone for procoagulant, prothrombotic events. They might have on the floor some sort of ischemic infarct, coronary artery disease, or there is a high chance of pulmonary thromboembolism also. When a patient suddenly deteriorate in the improving trend, you need to do immediately echocardiography to see is there any acute RARV dilatation, right atrial, right ventricular dilatation, to exclude pulmonary embolism. Because there are instances when a patient is on therapeutic anticoagulation, patient might develop some ischemic events, prothrombotic events and all. So basically, so this is the overview on the clinical manifestation depending upon their severity and the therapy depending upon their severity. At most, very important is we need to take care of our healthcare providers along with taking care of the patient also. Stay safe. Thank you all.